Good evening. If I were to tell you there was something sinister residing in the servers of Team Fortress 2, you would probably assume I was referring to the cheater bots that made the game unplayable for the better part of 10 years. But it turns out there's another abnormality lying dormant in TF2 servers. An eldritch mystery far more dangerous than a simple hacker bot. An oddity simply referred to as the server blight. The server blight has sort of taken the TF2 community by storm lately. It feels like anytime you play TF2, you'll see someone in chat making some kind of joke about it, and I've personally had a bunch of people reach out asking me to talk about it in a video. I wasn't too sure exactly what the server blight was at first, but after looking into it, I've discovered it's something of an urban legend or creepypasta in the TF2 community, originating from a TF2 YouTube series created by a channel called Two Idiot Germans. The channel has existed since 2020 and used to be home to some pretty standard TF2 clip compilations, but it's best known today for its recent foray into spooky TF2 storytelling, and I know that might sound sort of eye-roll worthy, but I promise it's much more interesting than it sounds. See, the Serverblight series is told from a sort of unique perspective. It's not just an SFM animation like Emesis Blue. The animations are rather presented as snapshots of gameplay inside TF2 itself. It's a story told inside the game, a lot like how, say, Red vs. Blue was told inside Halo. But the characters aren't just characters, they're players inside a game server, experiencing the spooky events of the series in real time. It's sort of like Unfriended, if you remember that film. Throughout the Serverblight saga, we follow a series of people unfortunate enough to encounter the mythical Serverblight and become privy to some of the disturbing horrors that apparently lie within the quiet depths of TF2's server browser. The pilot episode that started it all is a video called The Empty Server, with a description reading, "Careful what servers you find yourself in. You never know what you might find." The video introduces us to our series' main protagonist, a player named Dixalot, whose real name will later be revealed as Aaron. We see Aaron load into a TF2 community server on the map Thunder Mountain, though it appears to be empty based on the team select page we catch a brief glimpse of. The server doesn't seem to be actually empty, however, as we see Aaron introduce himself in chat. "What up, gays?" We see a user named Gillysuit right back in chat.
KYS.
It's not exactly a warm welcome, but I can't say this is uncharacteristic of how real TF2 players interact with each other. Now, there's an old server hosting tactic called player spoofing, where a server hoster will display a fake player count to trick people into joining their servers. But this doesn't seem to be your typical player spoof, as we'll soon see the players that Aaron encounters on this server are definitely not bots. Keep this Gillysuit guy in mind too, he'll be important later. Aaron replies to Gillysuit, calling him rude, but little does he know this KYS message is not what it seems. Aaron makes his way out of spawn and is confused by just how vacant the battlements of this supposedly populated server are. But then he sees something even stranger. A spy named Brett Olphin who immediately runs out of bounds off a cliff to his own death, then promptly disconnects from the server. Aaron simply laughs it off and goes to shoot at an enemy scout named Directions. But instead of dodging, the scout instead beckons Aaron to take the shot in an eerie nodding gesture that couldn't actually happen in the real game. It's almost as if the scout is a real being and not just a vehicle being controlled by a player. Aaron takes the shot anyway, but by this point it's obvious something is really strange about this server. And this pattern of players behaving in strange and self-destructive ways is getting unnerving. Aaron tries to laugh it off in the chat, but he just gets the same unfriendly message back from Gillysuit, KYS. Continuing to take it as an insult, Aaron writes back, "You too." Heading further into the map, Aaron sees a Heavy's body laying face down, and he complains in chat about this idle server BS. But in case it wasn't obvious enough that something is terribly wrong, Aaron writes out an ominous message. "Why can't I disconnect?" And looking back, the Heavy's body has disappeared. It's at this point we notice that the background music, a rendition of the iconic MVM shop theme, has begun distorting. Now's a good time to mention that the Serverblight series has a semi-original soundtrack composed by possibly Lino, who is also the series animator and one half of the duo that makes up the Two Idiot Germans team. The music is mostly re-renditions of familiar TF2 themes scored to fit the events of each video, but I still appreciate the effort that went into them. Anyways, the MVM theme we've been hearing no longer resembles the familiar jaunty music we all know. It's become something a bit flatter and more uncomfortable. Pressing further into the map, Aaron starts hearing footsteps, following them to finally come face to face with Gillysuit himself. He's a red engineer with no weapon, again telling Aaron to KYS. But the way he goes about it is strange. Just like the scout nodding earlier, Gillysuit is moving in a way uncharacteristic of typical TF2 player interactions. So Aaron asks out loud, "How are you doing that?"
You have to kill yourself.
"How are you moving like that?"
Leave while you still can.
Gillysuit somehow takes Aaron's melee weapon away from him, indicating that fighting is not an option. He then freezes and abruptly sprints away in terror. Turning his head, Aaron sees why. There's a Heavy, presumably the Heavy we saw disappear earlier, standing around the corner. But something is really wrong. If we look closely, we'll see his hand has 6 fingers. We hear a pitched down version of the medic's voice. Aaron sprints away as the monster gives chase and erupts more distorted TF2 voice lines. Aaron stumbles across Ghillie-Suit's dead body, with blood smeared on the wall behind him spelling out a message.
Don't let it take you alive.
As it turns out, KYS was not a toxic insult, but rather a kind of warning. It's a fun and creative subversion of both the horror movie trope of a character killing himself before the monster can get him, as well as a clever twist on typical toxic TF2 player lingo. And I think that's pretty clever. Aaron continues running away from the monstrosity that made Ghillie-Suit take his own life. From the tiny glimpses we see of it in the chase, the monster seems to take on the form of a bunch of character models fused together, as if it's taken all the members of the server and pulled them into itself. Aaron makes his way to the cliff side of the map and jumps off, finally disconnecting as the mysterious monstrosity peers down from the ledge. We then see a game crash window pop up, and that is where the video ends. So, what the fuck was any of that? Well, it seems obvious that the story is warning us of some kind of monster haunting the empty and sparse servers of TF2, sending freakily realistic mercenaries running to kill themselves, locking players' disconnect function, and trying to capture them in some way. The name hasn't been officially introduced yet, but this monster is what we'll learn soon enough to be the Serverblight. We don't see much of the Serverblight, but from the glimpse we get in the video and in its thumbnail, it appears to be some kind of collective amalgamation of multiple classes or players stitched together, with various distorted and stretched appendages. Visually, the monster is also exploring an uncomfortable body horror take on the classic ragdoll glitches of Gmod and TF2, with shades of that creepy old You Need Me video. All we really know about the monster's nature right now, though, is that it seems to absorb players or characters into itself. It stops you from disconnecting once you're in a game with it, and it seems the only way to escape it is to kill oneself by jumping off a cliff and triggering a game crash. But we'll learn a little more about how the monster works in the second video, titled Migration. The video description reads, "Don't trust everything you see in Team Fortress 2. Some things only pretend to be players." Migration picks up right where the last video left off, with Aaron having just crashed disconnected from the empty Thunder Mountain server as we pan through the barren level he's left behind. The ominous monster is not physically seen, but its presence is still felt as lights subtly flicker throughout the map. Suddenly, an engineer in a gibbous and pyrovision goggles connects to the server and joins the red team. Our second protagonist's name is Johnny Danny 12. He's likely a child and a new player based on his stereotypical free-to-play noob outfit. The 12 in his name might denote a birth year in 2012, making him around 13 years old. Unfortunately, he will not be as lucky in his encounter with the monster as Aaron was. Johnny sees a message from a name familiar to us. Ghillie-Suit writes in chat,
"I'm having so much fun."
But this can't be the same Ghillie-Suit that warned Aaron to not let the monster take him alive and to escape the server in the last video. We already saw his dead body. So this appears to be the monster using Ghillie-Suit's likeness and repeating his earlier chat messages to prod at Johnny, meaning that whatever is occupying these servers lures in victims, and then, once it's captured them and made them a part of its body, also imitates their past speech to lure more victims in. This thing is intelligent. Johnny Danny 12 simply dismisses the off-kilter messages the monster spams the chat with. He's in danger and he doesn't even know it. Johnny goes to build a sentry, but begins to notice a flesh impact sound coinciding with every print of Ghillie-Suit's message. The way the camera begins focusing on Johnny at a low FOV from weird angles gives the impression he's being actively watched and hunted by the entity. Johnny expresses confusion about the lack of players on the server, but his questions in chat get drowned out by the spam. Johnny paces through the map and discovers the source of all the noise. Ghillie-Suit is seen sat at a staircase, his head repeatedly smashing into the floor with a creepy grin. This confirms the monster is physically manipulating Ghillie-Suit's body and smashing messages out of it to lure Johnny. The monster itself finally reveals itself and emerges from the stairs behind Ghillie-Suit's body, and Johnny's time is almost up. When the monster finally catches up, it touches Johnny, and he instantly disappears from the server. A deep medic voice bellows from the monster and says, Then the monster disappears too, and the disconnect messages flooding the server indicate it's taken all the people it's absorbed with it. The video then slowly fades to black as we pan out to the rest of the server, now a ghost town after the monster has had its way with it. It seems obvious the monster has absorbed Johnny, but the video title Migration is interesting. The only thing we see resembling a migration in the video is the monster's abrupt exit from the server. So I think this is meant to imply that the monster has somehow used Johnny to quote-unquote migrate to another server, and that's why it thanked him afterward. The story advances further in the next upload titled simply Serverblight. This is by far the most popular upload in the series and probably where most people were first introduced to the story. Its title also finally cements an official name for this creepy server-clearing, player-absorbing abomination we've been following, the Serverblight. There's been a lot of people speculating on the meaning of the name and how the term blight might imply that the monster is some sort of virus, but apparently the name's origin is actually pretty simple.
I'm a little Warhammer 40k fan because I love stuff like that and because I listen to metal and those things go hand in hand. you know? The name is quite metal. And why is it quite metal? Because I just stole the name from the title of one of Guy Haley's 40k books titled Blight.
Anywho, this video picks up the perspective of the protagonist Aaron from the first video, sometime after his last encounter with the Serverblight. Enough time has passed for him to feel comfortable playing TF2 again, but he's not doing it alone this time. Aaron's brought along a friend named Matt, a new character and the first in the series who communicates in voice chat. The first character with full voice acting. It's not anything amazing, but it gets the job done, and it's certainly not bad for a free amateur web series. While it's never outright stated, I've always figured Aaron has invited Matt along here at least partially out of paranoia. That way, if the monster shows up again, at least he won't be the only one seeing it this time. Anyways, this episode starts a little differently than the previous ones. We see a lively match on PL Snowy Coast, and watch a pyro named Drain Damage taunt after catching Matt off guard and burning him to death. But immediately after, we see him let off a familiar message in chat, KYS. Those who have seen the original empty server video will recognize that the term KYS has more significance to the story than a simple chat insult. We know that it's a telltale calling card that the server blight is around and a warning to get the hell out of the server. But its usage here is a bit more ambiguous since nothing else outwardly weird seems to be going on, at least yet. It appears Drain Damage may really just be a spiteful player innocuously trash-talking after his kill. Either way, the message would probably bring back bad memories for Aaron after how things went the last time he encountered it. But Matt, meanwhile, is none the wiser and reacts like a typical gamer.
KYS? That bitch tells me KYS? Fucking pyromanes. Aaron? Go soldier. We're gonna carry this team to victory.
And so Aaron and his medic friend Matt set out to show the other team who's boss, and we get a fun montage of them kicking ass together. We notably see them get some assistance from another player named Scuba Master 96, whose free-to-play loadout is obviously reminiscent of Johnny Danny 12 from the last video. Once they push the card into the final terminus, Aaron and Matt celebrate their glorious triumph, savoring the salty chat messages from the blue team. However, basically the whole server disconnects immediately afterward, which isn't exactly a good sign. There's also an awkward moment where Matt teaches Aaron how to killbind, which you could maybe consider foreshadowing. With the whole server pretty much gone though, the blue team has been reduced to just Matt, Aaron, and the Scuba Master Heavy we just saw. Matt gets frustrated with the loss of players and Aaron's apparent strange aversion to casual mode.
One guy? Aaron, we're gonna get stomped. No one plays these community servers, man. Let's play casual. What's your deal with casual, man?
In the next moment, the server floods with players. An arrival just as abrupt as the departure we witnessed in the last video. We even see the familiar name of Gillysuit in chat, which Aaron notices. A spooky music cue makes the vibe shift unmistakable. The server blight has officially arrived. We have to leave, I know that name. We have to leave. Leave now.
What the fuck? Why can't I leave?
Killbind.
I can't. What the fuck? Who is this guy?
The server blight has again blocked gameplay functions that would allow its victims to escape. Aaron understands what's happening and begins trying to kill himself with his rocket launcher, but his friend Matt tells him to stop. Matt tries to assure him it must just be a hacker on the other team or something, and riding high on the victory they just had is up for the challenge of taking him on. Aaron reluctantly agrees to stay, for some reason. It's sort of a screaming at the protagonist not to go in the creepy shed moment. Regardless, the two prepare to face the quote-unquote hacker, as Matt switches to real Uber instead of the quick fix, and Aaron switches to the direct hit. They then ask if Scuba Master is on board, to which he responds,
"We go together."
Idiot.
When Aaron and Matt make it out to the battlements and start pushing the cart, 0 enemies come to greet them, despite the massive influx of players we saw just a second ago. In fact, even Scuba Master is nowhere to be seen. There's some major deja vu to the first video here. Aaron eventually spots an enemy scout running around a corner in the distance. Now, following a scout past enemy lines alone as a med with the Uber saw would be a dumb idea even if there weren't a hint of something paranormal going on. And Aaron even warns him that it's a bad idea, but Matt heads after the scout anyway.
I'm getting that Uber.
Matt somehow catches up, and somehow manages to actually kill the scout. But once he does, we see its body laying on the floor in a peculiar position, with a peculiar look of anguish on his face. Something felt very weird about killing this scout for Matt. He's witnessing the same strange human-esque behavior from his fellow players as Aaron did before. In fact, if we look back, this scout is literally the same scout Matt shot in the head in the first video. The same directions username, the same cosmetics, everything. How weird. Aaron asks Matt if he's okay after such a disturbing encounter, but before he can answer, the two are interrupted by distant gunshots. Our duo head off to cap the next point, but afterward hear even more distant shots. Aaron senses something suspicious going on and tells Matt to go check on him. I assume either on Scuba Master or on the body of that creepy scout he just killed. But after Matt leaves to do so, Aaron himself sees Directions scuttling freakishly away on all fours in another direction. If it's not obvious by now, Directions is not a normal player. He's instead seemingly some kind of sentient decoy of the Serverblight, and that's probably what he was the last time Aaron saw him too. We also briefly see Aaron's character nervously clasp his gun, which obviously doesn't make any sense. Most people probably brush past this detail, but we are now seeing Aaron moving his character in ways that should be impossible, just like Gillysuit did when Aaron first encountered him. The only conclusion I can draw from this is that being in the Serverblight's radius must cause you and the character you control in-game to slowly begin converging and binding as one, which is really fascinating and implies some unsettling things about the fate of the Serverblight's victims. It seems likely that when they're taken, it's not just their game form, but their literal physical self is absorbed as well. Anyways, Matt comes back and he and Aaron proceed through the map, eventually coming across their teammate who disappeared earlier, Scuba Master 96, huddling in a corner.
Yo, Heavy.
We see Scuba Master lower and drop his shotgun, which was presumably the source of those shots from earlier, as he repeats the same thing we last heard from him.
We go together.
Scuba Master seems to have become yet another victim of the Serverblight, and the monster is now in some fashion assuming his body, repeating his earlier words just as we saw it do with Gillysuit. The phrase "we go together" here also takes on a more ominous meaning now that the Serverblight is saying it. It no longer just means we'll fight together, it now means we will become one. We hear these terrible gurgling noises as Scuba Master turns around, a hand slowly submerging down his throat as if he just got done eating someone. Scuba Master, or rather whatever has come of him as a result of his interaction with the Serverblight, then bursts into a chase after Aaron and Matt, spamming chat and letting off pitch-down heavy voice lines along the way. His mangled, distorted fingers can't wait to get its hands on them to bring them into the monster's fold. Just in time though, Aaron and Matt manage to call a vote and vote kick Scuba Master, disappearing the monster before their very eyes right before it gets the chance to take them with its touch. It's a pretty fun way to write TF2's mechanics into a horror story. I tip my hat to the idiot Germans here. Rattled awake by a close call, Aaron finally comes to his senses about what's going on and recalls how he escaped the Serverblight the first time around. We have to leave. Leave the map. On last, we jump into the pit. Despite the unbelievable circumstances, Matt lets out a suspiciously casual response.
Yeah.
Aaron and Matt set out to the end of the map, but quickly come across a demo smashing his head into a pillar, exactly like Johnny Danny 12 saw Gillysuit doing in the second video. Matt goes to attack the monster like we saw him do to the scout earlier, but Aaron warns him not to because it's trying to trick us. I guess Aaron isn't a total box of rocks. All Matt has to say to this is,
Let's keep going.
his unbothered dialogue is only becoming weirder and weirder. Matt and Aaron continue moving toward the last point's cliff, but come across some kind of extremity stretching all the way out of the red spawn room. We quickly figure out it's the leg of an engineer, but not just any engineer, Johnny Danny 12. Johnny is seemingly being stretched and toyed with by the monster, and laying sideways in the snow. He says in chat,
Is this heaven? Why is it so cold?
Evidently, after Johnny Danny 12 was captured by the Serverblight, they both wound up in this server, which I think only gives credence to the idea that Johnny was somehow used to transport the monster. It's really quite sad if you slow down and conceptualize that this is a child ripped from his home. And there's an upload on the Two Idiot Germans channel where they read a dramatic fan comment someone penned about his tragic fate. Aaron goes to put Johnny out of his misery, but then the spawn door behind Johnny flails open. We see an ominous red light and hear terrible grunting noises, as the now familiar conglomerate monster's central mass finally comes barreling out toward our protagonists. Aaron begins shooting at the monster, but it accomplishes nothing, so he and Matt sprint away. The demo from earlier returns in a deformed state and gives chase as well, but Aaron manages to gun it down. In a brief moment of respite, Aaron tries to confide in his friend Matt. Fuck, that was bait. I saw that thing before, it's learning. It pretends to be a player, repeats voice lines it heard. But Matt simply replies,
What?
We have to leave the server. With another
What?
from Matt, it becomes obvious the monster has run out of lines to recycle. Matt too has fallen victim to the Serverblight. But for how long? If we go back through the video, we can see that Matt has been repeating himself for a while now.
Yo, Heavy. Yo, Heavy. Aaron? Aaron? Yeah. Let's keep going. Yeah. Let's...
It's left a little ambiguous exactly how and when Matt totally succumbed to the monster, which I like. But if I had to theorize, I'd say it's most likely that Matt succumbed to the monster off screen right after Aaron sent him off to, quote, check on him. This all reveals the monster is even more terrifying and Machiavellian than we first thought. Not only does it manipulate its victims' bodies and pass chat messages to trick new prey, it also sends out decoys. It can also repeat people's voice lines. And maybe most importantly, it doesn't always go for the easiest, fastest kill. The Serverblight could have immediately used Matt to attack Aaron as soon as as he got next to him again. But it instead allowed Aaron to continue moving through the map and pretended to still be his friend. It even went along with Aaron's vote kick to keep him alive longer. But why? The only thing I can figure is that it likes to learn more about how players react. It wants to get as good as it can possibly be at what it does. It's cunning. As Matt's fate becomes clear, a hand begins coming out of his mouth, similar to what we saw with Scuba Master. Aaron looks on at his friend in total horror. No, Matt. Please. The fingers on the hand start wiggling as more disgusting choking noises are heard. Matt's body disrupts further as he sprouts these familiar strange finger deformities, then sprints after Aaron. All the other monsters soon follow. If you pay attention, you can hear the monsters speaking in a distorted version of Matt's voice. Aaron makes a narrow rocket jump escape into the pit, just barely surviving for a second time, with his friend now fully lost to the clutches of the monster. Just before his escape, Aaron leaves a message to Matt. I'm sorry. If my reading is correct, that Aaron brought Matt around as a means of making sure he at least wouldn't encounter the Serverblight alone, then this is a really tragic ending. While Aaron has again skirted death from this monster, he has inadvertently led his friend, who he seemingly never clued in about it, directly into its clutches. A huge part of the culpability for his friend's death is on him. Groans of agony and gurgling can be heard from the monster occupying Matt's body, and the spawn room. The wiggling fingers and hand retreat back into Matt's mouth. He returns to a blank stare. Then, the server fills back up. The Serverblight has failed to capture Aaron, but is ready for more victims. One thing that's striking to me about this episode, I think, is that it almost shows the Serverblight as a jigsaw type of character, where it has this giant set of obstacles and tempting traps you have to steer clear of, and there's only one way to escape and outplay it. To navigate its traps, fight to the end of the level, and jump off the cliff. And it's really a miracle Aaron has escaped for a second time, but one must wonder, what exactly is the fate of his friend Matt? Well, there's a piece of the Serverblight series that's different from any of the other episodes. It's an upload called Puppet, a TF2 creepypasta. It's not an animation, it's just a narration of a spooky passage, and you can be forgiven for thinking it's totally separate from the Serverblight at a glance. But if you pay attention to the passage, you'll pick up on a lot of little clues and details that slowly confirm its relevance to the Serverblight saga. I won't read the whole thing, but it's basically a surreal horror vignette from the perspective of someone who's been victimized by the Serverblight, giving us a glimpse into what the fate of people like Johnny, Ghillie-Suit, and Scuba Master looks like. The protagonist wakes up in this unrecognizable, grotesque state, fused into a writhing mass of bodies, completely disoriented and lost. They've had their souls sucked into the game, and they are now one piece of the monolithic Serverblight entity. They struggle to understand exactly where they are, having just been a normal human playing Team Fortress 2 a few hours ago, and now somehow being unnaturally blended and trapped in what's basically a surreal digital centipede of captured human souls. It's a shifting, suffocating flesh prison, and it sounds like a pretty horrific fate. No matter how much you love Team Fortress 2, nobody would want to be a piece of it in this way. And I won't lie, it is kind of funny how the serious tone of this vignette eventually clashes with the obvious silliness of its premise. This poor guy in existential hellish body horror torment takes a second to exclaim,
I can see the distinct photocopied textures of Team Fortress 2.
The mention the protagonist makes of snow implies he's on Snowy Coast from the last video. But then there's a comment he makes about the blight quote-unquote rebuilding me according to some otherworldly blueprint. If I had to guess, I think this probably describes the moments immediately after the last episode's conclusion, where the Serverblight is once again migrating to another server like it previously used Johnny to do. It's described to be a pretty painful process. Once it's migrated, the blight apparently squeezes through a tunnel and gets its hand on a helpless spy player. And the passage ends on the implication that the protagonist is being used against his will as a limb to capture this innocent spy. In summary, I think the Serverblight has used Matt to migrate just like it used Johnny before, and then taken a spy as another victim. And in fact, I think the protagonist of this passage most likely is Matt. The voice actor narrating the passage is the same as Matt's, and we even see Matt's medic character in the on-screen art. Although the central focus of the image is a sniper for some reason, I think maybe this sniper is meant to represent Matt's real-life soul in an abstract way. Or maybe it's not Matt at all, and it's just some other poor victim, who knows. Whoever the protagonist is, or used to be, a person with a life, a family, a future, he is now nothing but a puppet of the Serverblight. And that brings us to the latest installment of the Serverblight saga, and a quite unique one at that. It's called Assimilation, and its description reads, a monster lurks in digital crevices, and the more you struggle, the deeper it pulls you in. This short is unique in that it's the two idiot Germans' first attempt at incorporating live action elements into their work. It follows a new protagonist named Cyrenex, real name Gavin, and his encounter with the Serverblight monster. It starts on a lively Dust Bowl match as a creepy jukebox rendition of the TF2 Katotsky kick song Soldier of Dance plays. More creative soundtrack work from possibly completely know. We zoom out to Gavin's perspective as a blue spy in Spawn, then out of his laptop in this dingy, creepy room he for some reason plays TF2 in. As Gavin sits down to play, the usual immature chat messages of a casual TF2 lobby flood in, but after a few moments, a sense of paranoia sweeps over him. And once he gets behind enemy lines, he hears a noise behind him which distracts him and causes him to die in the game. After respawning, he cloaks behind enemy lines again, and we see other players in chat remarking about how weird the server is. While still cloaked, Gavin hears the noise behind him again, and when he turns around in game, he sees a sniper blankly watching him. The sniper walks right past him, but it's impossible to ignore how strange everyone on the server is acting. It begins to seem likely that the blight has gotten even smarter since the last time we saw it, that everything we're seeing right now is a facade it's constructed, and that Gavin is in serious trouble. After Gavin lands a backstab on a medic, he runs away toward the center of the stage, and after he decloaks, we get a shot of his arms on the keyboard and mouse becoming the spy's arms for a quick moment. It's honestly the funniest moment of the entire series in my opinion, and essentially confirms that hypothesis I described earlier when Aaron's character physically clasped his gun in nervousness. That being in the proximity of the server blight begins to bring your physical form and your in-game form together as one. As Gavin notices what's happening to him, we even see his real words come out of his character's mouth. We also catch a quick glimpse of what looks like a heavy's hand writhing over a bed or carpet in Gavin's room. In the distance, Gavin spots a soldier staring at him, who then quickly runs away, almost as if it made a mistake to be caught watching him. Gavin types in chat, "What is it with this server?" And when he runs back to where he came from, he sees the entire server looking at him, despite him being cloaked. The server blight's decoys have dropped their act, and they're zeroing in on its next victim. More of the lines we saw at the beginning of the episode begin repeating in the chat, and we see a quick glimpse of what looks like a heavy standing behind Gavin in his room. The decoys all start chasing Gavin, and as he runs, he gets flanked by a soldier with the trademark server blight fingers, forcing him into an underground tunnel. Once in the tunnel, Gavin tries to disconnect, but just like Matt and Aaron before him, the game won't let him leave. And for the record, there is no cliff to jump off in Dust Bowl, and no easy way to kill oneself with spy's weapons either. So for all intents and purposes, Gavin is already boned. As he turns to look behind him, he feels physically present in the Dust Bowl tunnel for a brief second. Gavin begins hearing the server blight cramming itself down the stairs behind him, mirroring the passage we heard in the puppet creepypasta about the monster forcing itself into a tunnel. And since we can see Gavin is playing as a spy, that means we already know how this story ends. Gavin runs out of the tunnel and up to the last capture point, but instead of capping, he gets a notification telling him the capture is blocked by an enemy. He turns and sees the quote-unquote enemy stopping his capture. A single finger of a deformed heavy stretching out a spawn, a familiar type of monster to us by now. As Gavin drops his knife, Scuba Master 96 from the last animation begins revealing himself. He repeats his same line, "We go together," as more monsters surround Gavin from behind. Caught in the middle with nowhere to go, we see the heavy's fingers begin twiddling on the real-life player's shoulders. As the monsters close in and the sound of flesh smashing and squishing together intensifies, Gavin begins forging into TF2 because of the server blight. The danger of Scuba Master 96 begins bleeding into reality, and the monster begins to physically merge with and assimilate Gavin. We see a cacophony of fingers and flesh close in on Gavin, and within a few seconds he screams and begins deforming too. Then, we cut to the real world. All that's left of Gavin after he's assimilated is a limp body with a blank pupilless stare and blood streaming out of his mouth. So there you have it, a first-hand depiction of the server blight trapping and assimilating someone, and what the real-world aftermath looks like. And now, presumably Gavin is a puppet, just like Matt. So to sum it all up, what exactly is the story we're looking at here with the mystery of the server blight? Well, we can pretty confidently conclude that the server blight is a supernatural, malevolent entity that assimilates players into itself, very literally pulling their soul and consciousness through the screen when it gets their hands on them, leaving their physical body in the real world as a husk, and using their new digital body as a pawn or a physical piece of its own monolithic form. Being in the same server at all with the server blight will slowly begin marrying the mind of a player to their digital character, with their perspectives and sense of agency fusing as one, and their fates too if they're not careful. The server blight is a cunning monster. It mimics the behavior of humans it's already assimilated to draw on more victims. It attempts to psychologically manipulate players in a conniving and intelligent way to learn more about its prey of choice. And it has domain over the game itself to block certain functions like kill binding and disconnecting. And like so many other internet horror monsters, it doesn't seem to discriminate. Even random children can be its prey. The server blight seems to practically have an inventory of captured victims that it repeatedly deploys in a variety of ways. Some victims seem to become simple physical appendages, others are used as disguises or split forms of the monster, and some are used as decoys, simulacra of real player activity. But none can escape. Even the decoys, if they die or kill themselves, will wind up right back doing the bidding of the monster. So if you see a message like KY SYS if you see suspicious activity that feels fake. You have to know it could be a sign of the server blight. You have to know it could be controlling any and all players in the lobby, including even ones on the microphone. And you have to abuse its one weakness, if you can even call it that. The only way to escape it is to physically get the hell out of the server however necessary. And the cliff crash exploit is the only surefire method we've seen work so far. But the real mystery is, to what end is all this absorption and assimilation leading to? The server blight seems to be seeking power through its freakish real-world assimilation. Some have speculated that it could be an AI of some kind, or even a rogue hacker bot with artificial intelligence, designed to dominate players in TF2, but taking things too far. But the server blight feels more esoteric and eldritch than that to me. So what do I think it is? Well, I don't know that it really is intended to be much more than a spooky Halloween entity, but I like to think of it as a funny twist on the idea that a person's favorite game becomes a part of them, especially a game like TF2 that people never leave. The server blight can be the TF2 community's unbreakable loyalty made literal, existential, and scary. Or something like that, I don't know. All I really know is that Aaron, the primary protagonist, who's encountered the server blight twice now and just barely survived both times, should really consider putting Team Fortress 2 down for good. I don't know, man, give Counter-Strike a try or something. Now, I know Server Blight isn't the most amazing filmmaking effort of all time, but the creators composed an original soundtrack for it, they directed it like a film, they clearly cared about what they were making, and I can respect that. Apparently this all started because the series writer grew up obsessed with old creepypastas, and he and his friend one day decided they wanted to attempt a genuinely high-effort TF2 creepypasta for Halloween. And that early internet horror creepypasta influence is pretty obvious, with the messages written in blood, the pitched-down voices, and the general paranormal video game premise. I've also seen a lot of people say the Server Blight series is obviously inspired by John Carpenter's The Thing, and its choice to withhold the appearance of the Server Blight creature for creepy effect, and its use of stretching body horror. Hell, the setting of the third video is PL Snowy Coast, a map that's heavily inspired by The Thing. But apparently this is all a total coincidence.
Listen, I was 12 years old once. I've seen Watch Mojo's top 10 scariest scenes in John Carpenter's The Thing or something like that. I saw what I needed to see. I haven't seen the movie, no.
Apparently a more prominent inspiration was the Still in the Simulation Bikini Bottom horror story. If you've never seen that, it's basically a comic horror saga set in the SpongeBob universe, where Patrick turns into this otherworldly and grotesque cosmic monster, and goes around terrorizing Bikini Bottom by absorbing and brutalizing his friends and the cast of the show. It's gruesome and creative, but also a bit tongue-in-cheek and self-aware. It's not hard to see how parts of this series inspired the creators of Serverblight. By the way, the channel behind the Serverblight series is called Two Idiot Germans, because all of these animations are literally the effort of two German kids. Darefish06, I think that's how you say it, is not only the writer and director of this series, but also the voice actor for Matt and the narrator of the Puppet creepypasta. Possibly Lino is not only the animator and composer, but also the live-action actor for Gavin in the Assimilation video. And they're both only around 19 years old, which makes what they achieve with this series all the more impressive. Especially when you learn all the terrible hoops they had to jump through to get anything good out of SFM, which is just as much a monstrosity as the Serverblight itself.
The amount of times SFM crashed, oh, it was terrible.
It got to a point where I would just click on the soldier or something, and then proceed to wait 30 seconds for the program to react.
The influx of fan-made Serverblight episodes and the bustling activity on its Reddit shows that the Idiot German's little Halloween experiment has left a permanent mark on the TF2 community. And with the live-action experimentation in the last episode, it's clear that the Germans themselves want to take what they have, run with it, and use it to push more creative boundaries. And I can't wait to see where that leads them. They've also spent a ton of time highlighting fan art in their community and generally laughing along with the memes. They even let fans submit usernames to have a chance to appear as names in the chat feed in the animations. And it's exciting to live in a time where the TF2 community is getting more and more comfortable in making brazen, lengthy, serious creative efforts like Serverblight and Nemesis Blue. It's becoming more obvious day by day how indelible TF2 is to internet culture, how much depth and meaning there is to find in it, and how many creative projects it can bear. People will never ever stop adoring this game and doing impressive or interesting things with it. It simply struck a chord that intense. And that's the number one thing the Serverblight teaches us. The TF2 players will keep playing even if the game gets no updates. Even if there's bots flooding every server. Even if there's a fucking monster trying to steal us through the computer and torture us forever. We can deal with so much. But the one thing we just can't handle is a guy with stuff coming out of his mouth. We simply lose our shit over it every single time. Thank you to the creators of Serverblight for being cool with me covering their project. Definitely go check the Two Idiot Germans channel and the individual members' channels out below, and show them some love for me if you enjoyed this video. Other than that, thank you for watching, I hope you liked the video, and have a good day.